2 years after our breakup, I received an official letter from Liu Ruyan demanding the services of a lawyer. She demanded that I return all the money that was allegedly spent on me during our affair. This seemed absurd because Liu Ruyan was the president of the influential Liu Family Corporation. For her, such amounts are mere pennies, not worth even a second of attention. The real reason was different. Her new boyfriend was pathologically jealous of her relationship with me. She wanted to prove to him that she no longer had feelings for me, and she wasn't afraid to even exploit my dependence on money for my mother's treatment to hurt me. In total, she tallied up 23.8 million, a huge sum she supposedly spent on me over the years. Every little detail on that list was still in my records. She even included the cost of groceries for my mother, turning the care into a dry financial statement, as if the cards had been blocked. 2 years ago, I was forced to accept this money to pay for my mother's critical operation. I essentially sold myself to Liu Ruyan, although I always understood that she saw me as just a convenient toy, nothing more. I was fine with this until her new favorite returned from abroad and learned of my existence. A real nightmare began. I was publicly asked to account for my expenses, and the next day Liu Ruyan slipped me a detailed accounting book. Everything was recorded there, from a $2 ice cream to a luxury car that I had once given her myself, and even the expenses for our shared life, which she now demanded to be split in half. Besides the debt to Hekyang, you owe me 3.8 million and I expect it in a month, she said lazily, leaning back on the sofa. That same favorite looked at me mockingly, and just his glance made me feel sick. What, no money? He smirked. He openly threatened me with humiliation, demanding that I repay debts that I physically could not cover. Dozens of eyes were looking at me, and suddenly a loud, mocking laugh rang out in the hall. Poor Ruyan, someone in the crowd chuckled. Where's he going to find 3.8 million? All he ever knew how to do was crawl at your feet. Yeah, right, another chimed in. I wonder who he'll sell himself to now to scrape together that money. Liu Ruyan, barely holding back her laughter, said through gritted teeth, if you serve me well today, I might knock 3.5 million off your salary. She swirled her wine glass lazily, showing that the fate of my debt no longer concerned her. My face was burning with shame. I understood that if I didn't agree, she would sue me, and I would be left with nothing. My chest tightened with a sharp pain, and this was far from the first time. I remember the first time I didn't have time to cook food for her favorite. She punished me by leaving me hungry for 3 days. The second time I accidentally broke her boyfriend's tablet. She let her guards beat me within an inch of my life. The third time, just to stroke Hekyang's ego, she forced me to wear ridiculous clothes, humiliating me in front of everyone. I survived then by a miracle, and now my only desire was to repay the debt and forget this hell forever. But she dragged me here to turn me into a clown for her rich friends, knowing how much I needed money for my mother. I forced a smile. If I do it, will you really give me 3.8 million? Liu Ruyan's retinue immediately picked up the game, expecting some entertainment. She called the waitress and ordered 10 bottles of strong alcohol. Drink them all and the money is yours. I grabbed the first bottle and started drinking. The strong alcohol burned my throat and stomach, and tears involuntarily rolled from my eyes. They looked at me like I was some strange beast, but I didn't care. Dignity had long since given way to desperate need. Each bottle was difficult to swallow. Everything was swimming before my eyes, but I continued to swallow this poison. When I finished, the maid asked hesitantly, Sister Liu Ruyan, should I really give him the money? Give it back, she said indifferently, without even looking at me, as if she were throwing scraps to a stray dog. I staggered out of the building and rushed to the hospital, hoping that now I would have time to save my mother. But a shock awaited me at the hospital. The doctor, looking down, announced that on the orders of Ms. Liu, all treatment had been cancelled. The world collapsed. I called Liu Ruyan in a panic, begging her to have mercy, but all I heard was her cold laughter. It's okay, that's the price you pay for being stubborn, she said and hung up. The phone fell out of my hands. I stood in the room, looking at my mother's motionless face, and felt like something inside me was dying forever. With trembling hands, I touched her cold hand. It was the end. I was left alone in this world. Towards morning, when the first rays of the sun illuminated the ward, I was informed that my mother had passed away and given her last letter. The letter contained only one sentence of apology. I cried, unable to bear the pain. She asked me to live on, and this became the final gift: freedom from this attachment. After the funeral, I didn't hesitate. I called the National Research Institute and offered to participate in the project I had long dreamed of. The professor on the other end of the line, after listening to me, asked, "Fang Yuan, are you sure? Have you resolved your issues with Mom and that woman?" I answered firmly, "My mother is gone, and I don't love that woman anymore." He paused, then said, "Your most painful time will be the beginning of your rise. Your life as a genius is just beginning." Perhaps I really was a little in love with Liu Ruyan, since I allowed her to penetrate so deeply into my soul and destroy it. I convinced myself that working hard to pay for my mother's treatment was worth everything, until Hekyang appeared, and Liu Ruyan's world, far removed from simple human hardships, was turned upside down. She often said that I had simply picked up her photo from the ground, implying that she had adopted me like a stray puppy. I understood that there was a gap between me and her beloved Hekyang, which no matter how hard I worked, I would never be able to bridge. I humbly played the role of a worthy replacement, hoping for only one thing: to cure my mother and leave this golden cage forever. I waited for the moment when the debt would be repaid, despite all the cruelty and heartlessness that Liu Ruyan showed towards me. I endlessly reread the messages on my phone, trying to comprehend how quickly my life had turned to ashes. Trying to find some meaning, I returned to the villa to pick up my things and found Liu Ruyan waiting for me with an icy expression on her face. "Where have you been? Why haven't you answered my messages?" Her voice sounded cold and commanding, as if I were her property. I tried to justify myself, but she didn't want to listen. In a fit of anger, she chased after me and pushed me hard against the wall. "You upset Hekyang, what right do you have to be angry?" she screamed as I slammed into the wall, feeling blood running down my cheek. The pain in my broken arm was unbearable, but I remained silent, knowing that my apologies meant nothing to her. When I returned home, pale after 10 bottles of wine, she ordered me to go to my grandfather, throwing out, "I'll give you 100,000, know what to say." It was an act of desperation. She wanted to use me as a puppet in front of the head of the family. I chuckled to myself. The Liu family held traditions sacred. So long ago, Hekyang was sent away from the country without further ado. Since then, the old man tried to arrange Liu Ruyan's personal life, but she only looked at me, seeing in my appearance only a pale reflection of her beloved Hekyang. I remembered that night vaguely. Sleeping pills slipped into the wine, loneliness, lack of money. That's how I finally became her toy in the eyes of society. The car stopped at an old estate, and at the threshold I saw Hekyang throw himself into Liu Ruyan's arms. "Ruyan, I missed you so much." Her face, usually cold as ice, instantly thawed, exuding a strange, painful tenderness. There was a whispering in the house, and suddenly the menacing voice of old Mr. Liu was heard from above. "What kind of rumors am I hearing?" The grandfather was determined, and his words sounded like a death sentence for this entire game. "I've decided everything," he announced. "In a month today, you and Fang Yuan must get married." Hekyang beamed, while Liu Ruyan, on the contrary, darkened, openly demonstrating her unwillingness to obey. "I don't agree," she shouted, for which she immediately received a blow with a stick from her grandfather, who did not tolerate arguments. The old man reminded her that 5 years had passed since they made their promise, and now it was time to answer for their words. I suddenly remembered those rare moments when she was kind to me, and I felt sorry for this woman who had become so inhuman in her pursuit of power. I remembered how she once spared an enemy because I asked her to, and how everyone then understood that she had a weakness, and that weakness was me. But all her gestures of attention, like the stars named after Hekyang, finally convinced me I don't belong here. "I won't marry him, he's not worthy of me," she declared, demonstratively squeezing Hekyang's hand in front of everyone. She looked at me with such disgust, as if I were dirt on her shoes, swearing that she would never become my wife. "I can declare him a groom for the sake of decency, but I will never marry him." She knelt before her grandfather, begging for mercy. Hekyang followed her example, tearfully asking his grandfather to bless their union instead of mine. The old man was barely breathing with rage, and I simply watched this farce, feeling like a complete stranger at this celebration of life. I took a wooden box out of my bag, inside which lay the family jade, a symbol of power which I decided to return. When I opened it, old Master Liu was dumbfounded. "Fang Yuan, you." I bowed one last time. "Grandpa, thank you for everything, but I can't stay with her anymore." Without looking back, I turned and walked away, leaving behind the sound of Ruyan and her lover's voices. Through the closed door, I heard them swearing, "This is true love," and I felt a huge sense of relief. I transferred all the money back to her account and then went to the company to finally resign. The manager, an old friend of mine, shook my hand. Congratulations, Fang Yuan, you've finally gotten out of this hell. I returned to the villa for the rest of my things, but a surprise awaited me there. Liu Ruyan was already there, having smashed a glass in a rage. The shards cut my hand deeply, and her slap made my head jerk to the side. Fang Yuan, Grandpa treated you like a grandson, and you pushed him off the roof. I was shocked. What are you talking about? How did he fall? I didn't understand how I could be accused of such a monstrous crime. Hekyang's voice came from somewhere above. The butler saw everything. Fang Yuan, stop pretending to be innocent. I was driven into a corner and I realized that it was a setup. They decided to destroy me completely using their power. I looked into Hekyang's eyes and saw triumph in them. He himself pushed the old man away to shift the blame onto me. At that moment the telephone rang, and the butler's voice in a trembling tone announced that the old gentleman urgently needed blood. He has the same blood type as Fang Yuan, someone whispered, and an icy horror gripped me. The next second I was roughly grabbed and dragged into the hospital, tied to a bed in the emergency room. The cold needle entered the vein and I realized, they don't just want to put me in jail, they are going to pump all the life out of me to save the one they themselves destroyed. I was overcome with despair and complete helplessness. I was ready to give my blood to save my grandfather, but I could not come to terms with the fact that I was being accused of something I did not do. I won't allow my honor to be trampled on like this, because Liu Ruyan, being captivated by lies, completely forgot how well her grandfather treated her. She threw it in my face with fury. Pray that he survives, otherwise I will make you go through all the circles of hell that you deserve, and I felt her anger pierce me right through. My strength was fading, my temperature was dropping, and I felt like I was balancing on the brink of death, wondering, am I really suffering the same way my mother did before her end? I shed a tear, and in my delirium I heard my mother's voice calling me. A long oblivion followed, full of ghostly dreams. In my visions, Liu Ruyan and I were still happy. She proudly introduced me to her friends as if I was the only meaning of her life. We visited my mother together, and I truly believed that our future together was possible, giving her all the warmth and devotion I could muster. But reality hit me like an icy shower when I realized the full depth of her cold indifference to my pain. When I woke up, I saw Liu Ruyan looking down on me. You're lucky that Grandpa is still out of danger and you're still alive. She ordered me to stay in this room to think until my grandfather woke up, but I just kept saying that I was ready to be a donor, but not ready to be guilty. In this forbidden room, permeated with the smell of blood and fear, where many people had once perished, I felt the darkness thickening. I wondered, if I break now, will it be the beginning of an endless feud, or will it torment me here for the rest of my days? Liu Ruyan, who once promised that we will never hold grudges, is now mired in monstrous lies, destroying everything that was between us. She threw me into the abyss, and my heart was torn by the realization of injustice. I never destroyed the building that I am accused of. I tried to get up from the floor, but my strength had completely left me, and I felt defeated, although innocent. Liu Ruyan just smiled bitterly. Fang Yuan, you're a good actor, but I don't believe a single word you say anymore, and left, leaving me in the void. The light went out and darkness enveloped me, bringing with it the panic attacks I had always kept hidden deep inside. My secret fear of confined spaces began to suffocate me, and before the only thing that saved me was her light, but now the door of the room was tightly closed. Soon Hekyang appeared and, looking at my face, said with gentle mockery, if you weren't so similar to me, Ruyan would never have looked at you. He took out a knife and, looking at me with animal hatred, whispered, I will disfigure you so that you can never seduce her again. My heart began to pound in the agony of survival. I tried to cover myself with my hands, expecting a blow, but instead of pain, something else followed. Suddenly the door shook from the impact, and someone pushed me hard, causing me to slam my head into the wall. The blow made my vision go dark, and when I came to, I saw that Hekyang had stabbed himself in the shoulder, staring at me with a mad gleam in his eyes. He was covered in blood and screaming, Fang Yuan, I tried to save you and you wanted to kill me. I was horrified by this sophisticated setup. I tried to justify myself, but Liu Ruyan, not listening to me, panicked and called the best surgeons to save her beloved. Hekyang lay pale and helpless, surrounded by his retinue, and I stood aside, feeling the world around me crumble under the weight of their lies. I stood on my knees by the window even in the winter cold, praying to the heavens for salvation, because without them my life lost all meaning. Suddenly, a nurse ran out of the operating room screaming that the patient was losing blood and the situation had become critical. Liu Ruyan, without a moment's hesitation, rolled up her sleeves. "Take my blood, I will save him." Even her friends were shocked by such selflessness. "Sister Ruyan, you will ruin yourself." They tried to stop her, but her gaze was cold and unwavering like steel. "He is my life, I can't exist without him," she repeated as the operation dragged on for a whole day. Hekyang survived, and Liu Ruyan, exhausted from blood loss, still glowed with happiness, having dedicated all the hospital's resources just for him. I watched this theater of love and could not forget how indifferently they allowed my mother to die when I needed the same help. Liu Ruyan continued to shower me with sarcasm as I watched their idol for the next 2 weeks. I packed up the rest of my things and moved out of the villa where I had lived for 5 years to wait for the start of my new job at the research institute. But the peace was short-lived. To celebrate Hekyang's recovery, Liu Ruyan threw a grand party at the capital's most expensive bar. All the golden youth gathered there, and the celebration turned into another act of my humiliation to the sounds of music and mocking questions. I finally decided to cut off all ties, leaving only a formal message about leaving, but then Hekyang called me again. "Fang Yuan, are you still trying to escape? You still haven't apologized for what you did." His venom-laced voice cut through my ears. I firmly replied that I had not done this and that I was ready to sue for libel if they continued their dirty games. I tried to leave, but the bodyguards blocked my way, and the atmosphere in the bar became tense. The music stopped and all eyes turned to me as Liu Ruyan looked me coldly in the eyes and asked, "Why have you become so cruel? First Grandpa, now you raised your hand against Hekyang. Do you want to turn me into your doll so that I will be by your side forever?" There was so much absurdity in her words. I was exhausted to the limit and simply repeated, "I did not harm either grandfather or Hekyang," feeling that every word was difficult to say. I understood that the witnesses had been bought and no one was interested in the truth. There was only a solid wall of lies around me. I swore in front of everyone, if I am lying, then may I never find happiness in this life, but this only made them even more angry. Hekyang, hiding behind Liu Ruyan, continued to provoke me until she finally lost her patience and snapped. "Don't blame me for being cruel, you asked for it," she said, ordering the bodyguards to use family methods on me. I was knocked down and pinned to the floor, and as I knelt before that crowd, I felt the icy hand of death squeezing my throat. Liu Ruyan took the whip from the bodyguard's hands and, slowly approaching, whispered, "Are you afraid? Have you thought about how desperately they suffered when you hurt them?" The whip struck my back and a sharp pain shot through my whole body like a powerful electric discharge, paralyzing me. Liu Ruyan's voice, full of cold fury, sounded as if through thick water. "Do you admit your guilt or not?" I forced out a barely audible no, stubbornly resisting, for which the whip flew up again, punishing me for my insolence. For her, I was a criminal, but for me, the torture with a whip and the mocking laughter of the crowd became only confirmation of my rightness. Despite the pain, a determination grew within me. I would not confess to something I had not done just to ease their conscience. At that moment, I finally realized that the worst mistake of my life was meeting Liu Ruyan, a man without a heart. "I won't let you talk like that, Ruyan," I began, but she rudely interrupted me, not even giving me a chance to defend myself. "You are nothing more than a biting dog," she hissed. "What right do you have to order me around?" And another series of cruel blows followed. The first blow was for the suffering of my grandfather, the second, for my fictitious attempt on the life of her beloved Hekyang. The third strike was a warning to cut the Liu family out of my life forever, and the next 64 strikes merged into one endless hell. My consciousness became clouded by the unbearable pain. I spat out a clot of blood and plunged into the saving darkness. When I woke up in a hospital room, I saw a live broadcast of my beating on TV. They made a public show out of my suffering. I lay there like an abandoned object until the owner of that very bar found me and called for help. I was too devastated to cry, but suddenly the door of the room quietly opened and Hekyang walked in, looking sickly pale. He put on a show, feigning a serious illness, in order to finally gain Liu Ruyan's trust. "While you pretend to be unhappy, I'll be next to Ruyan," he whispered with a grin and threw a package into my hands. The bag contained my mother's ashes, but when I opened it, I found it empty. There was only dust and dirt inside. "Where are my mother's ashes?" I shouted, to which Hekyang replied with pleasure that he had thrown them out to be fed to the wild dogs. He admitted that it was he who advised the hospital to stop treating my mother, knowing that Ruyan would blame me for her death. He showed me the ring that Liu Ruyan had bought at auction, wanting to emphasize that she belonged only to him. I recognized this decoration. It was exactly what Ruyan had wanted to give me 6 months ago, but now it was a symbol of my defeat. The entire room was filled with falsehood as Hekyang boasted of his triumph, completely trampling on my dignity. I couldn't stand it any longer. In a fit of despair and rage, I struck him, determined to avenge my mother. The scenario was reversed. I saw his frightened eyes and felt the thirst for revenge clouding my mind. But the next second I felt a heavy blow. Liu Ruyan pushed me hard, standing up to protect her beloved. The pain of the fall was nothing compared to the realization that she had finally chosen the side of my mother's killer. I grabbed her hand, shouting, "You killed her, Liu Ruyan, you signed her death warrant." Her eyes widened in surprise and doubt flashed through them for a moment, but Hekyang immediately intervened. "Ruyan, don't believe him, he's lying to make you feel sorry." His voice penetrated her consciousness like poison, displacing the remnants of her conscience. The guilt vanished from her gaze, replaced by an icy calm that was more terrible than any anger. She ordered that I be sent to a psychiatric clinic, where special conditions of detention awaited me. On the first day I tried to escape but was caught and brutally beaten, and on the second day I was tied to the operating table. On the third day I was broken and wanted only one thing, to meet Liu Ruyan and look into her eyes. Instead, mercenaries came and locked me in a dark cell where only screams and darkness reigned. I banged my head against the wall, begging higher powers to turn this nightmare into an ordinary dream. I recalled our moments of intimacy in the office and at home, not understanding how love could turn into such a sophisticated method of murder. Just when I was about to end it and bite my tongue, the door swung open and Liu Ruyan burst in. Her anger was directed at those who had tormented me, and for the first time in a long time I felt the warmth of her hands as she carried me out of hell. Waking up in my old bed in the villa, I heard terrible screams in the living room. Liu Ruyan sat with an expressionless face, ordering the bodyguards to deal with those who harmed me. At that moment she seemed like an all-powerful deity, but I understood that this was only a temporary respite in our war. The pain in my back from the lacerations was unbearable, but I felt a strange calm amidst the chaos. She came to me and said cruel words. "It was just Hekyang's mistake, forget about it, you are safe." She gave me a letter of apology and promised that she would not allow such misunderstandings to happen again, still insisting that she only loved Hekyang. "For our 5 years I will provide you with a comfortable life," she added, as if buying my forgiveness with a handful of coins. Her words sounded like a handout to a beggar, and for the first time I felt complete indifference to her money and power. For the sake of my mother's memory, I was ready to endure everything, but inside me there were no more tears or affection. Seeing my coldness, she left, leaving behind only the smell of falsehood and a premonition of inevitable retribution. Left alone, I tore up her letter of apology and without hesitation dialed the police. At midnight, when the city fell asleep, I took the final step. I reported all of Hekyang's crimes, putting an end to this story. In the last 10 hours before leaving, I packed my things, took a bath, and went to my mother's grave to say goodbye. I was kneeling, my face pressed against the tombstone, and the silence around me seemed to be the only response to my inner pain. "Mom, I'm finally free," I whispered, and at that moment a firefly landed on my finger like a sign from above. Its flickering light illuminated the tombstone, and it seemed to me that the warmth of my mother's smile, so familiar and dear, touched me again. I lay on the ground, feeling peace fill me, as if all the hardships of past years began to dissolve in this night's silence. I slept soundly as never before and woke up to a bright sun, realizing that I finally had a clear future ahead of me. My phone vibrated. The notification about Hekyang's wedding arrived at the same time as a message from the police that my case was being investigated. I silently deleted the invitation, erased my tormentor's contacts, and smiling, headed to the airport to leave this city forever. As the plane lifted off, I felt the tension that had been holding me back for years finally lift. I was free. That same night, Hekyang proposed to Liu Ruyan, turning the event into a big show that was discussed throughout the country. The live broadcast broke all popularity records and drones lined up in the sky, forming symbols of their great love. "Ruyan, will you marry me?" His voice trembled, but this was only part of a carefully planned scenario. Liu Ruyan tearfully agreed as the sky lit up with the fireworks paid for by her wealth. The romantic story of their love was broadcast on the screens of all skyscrapers, imposing this false ideal on the city. The couple kissed against a lavish backdrop, and thousands of netizens admired this perfect union of beauty and power. Everyone around them repeated that only a person like Haekyang was worthy of being next to the influential Liu Ruyan. Some tried to recall that she once had a fiancé, but the next day she herself shut down these conversations with a public statement. She posted a photo of Haekyang leaning on her shoulder, claiming that he was the only person she had ever loved. Someone online timidly asked, "Ruyan, won't Fang Yuan be upset?" To which she replied with a grin that he was just a replacement. Haekyang, pleased that she had confirmed her choice in front of everyone, continued to indulge his vanity, finally securing his status as the favorite. Liu Ruyan hesitated, fearing old master Liu's anger, but Haekyang's tears meant more to her than any family tradition. She put everything aside to personally oversee the wedding preparations, turning every flower into a symbol of their sincere affection. The outfits were created by the world's best designers, and every detail was imbued with Liu Ruyan's desire to make her chosen one the happiest. Those around her whispered, surprised that it was she, cold and calculating, who was the first of them to decide on such a step. Everyone was waiting to see who she would choose in the end, and now, seeing her determination, they only confirmed the correctness of her choice. "Fang Yuan will be very sad to hear about this," her sisters whispered, because they saw how much I meant to her. But Liu Ruyan only snapped, "Fang Yuan was an ugly replacement, and my heart belongs only to Haekyang." Suddenly, she felt a strange irritability and poured herself some wine, remembering that she hadn't heard anything about me for a long time. She wondered if I had really disappeared, and these thoughts about 5 years of our life suddenly threw her off balance. Deep down, she couldn't accept that the dead heart could forget her so easily, and this anxiety prevented her from preparing for the celebration. She began to blame me for her unreasonableness, hiding from herself within the walls of her luxurious office. Those around her saw her condition and only fueled her greed for power, completely clouding her mind. I became a ghost of the past for them, and Liu Ruyan tried with all her might to push my features out of her memory. Returning to the villa, she saw Haekyang in his formal attire, something she had previously admired, but now seemed alien. For the first time, she looked at him and didn't see what she was looking for. The picture in her head began to rapidly disintegrate. Haekyang tried to seduce her before the wedding, but his actions only caused fatigue, not the former passion. After taking a cold shower, Liu Ruyan, against her will, remembered not him but me, and this thought completely overwhelmed her. She remembered our moments of happiness, and this memory became unbearable, forcing her to look for ways to suppress the truth. Haekyang, noticing her coldness, pushed her away in anger, shouting, "Liu Ruyan, if you are in love with Fang Yuan, go to him." She woke up as if from a dream, feeling deep disappointment, but the fear of losing power forced her to justify herself. "I'm sorry, Haekyang, it was just a delusion. I love only you," she said, not believing her own words. She squeezed his hand with such force as if she was trying to keep herself from falling into the abyss of her own illusions. "I will always love Haekyang," she repeated the vow, and the sound echoed in the empty room like a death sentence. She knew that for such words the Liu family could deprive her of everything, but at that moment she chose to betray even her ancestors. Haekyang smiled, unaware that her vow was just a way to calm her torn conscience. She openly went against the elders, putting her whims above the rules that their family had guarded for centuries. But after a night spent in false promises, she was left alone in the office, where everything reminded her of my presence. She looked for documents but found only emptiness, and the image of the angel that I was for her did not give her peace. She remembered how I cooked food, how I took care of her, and realized that in her ideal world there was no room for real life. I was far away, transformed from a broken replacement into a man with a strong will, ready to meet the dawn of his true freedom. I used to feel like the main star in Liu Ruyan's life, but with Haekyang's return, everything changed and I became nothing but a nuisance. My life turned into an endless wait and helplessness, while Liu Ruyan, irritated by my rare requests for help from my mother, increasingly grabbed the phone. I remained silent, ceasing to answer her calls, and this silence on my part became something frightening and incomprehensible for her. She constantly refreshed the chat, trying to find at least one message from me, because even when she needed me, I was restrained, asking only for the bare necessities for my mother's treatment. Now when she herself decided to write to me, her phone remained coldly silent, causing a strange, unhealthy anxiety in her soul. The weather that day was gloomy, the sky overcast with clouds, foreshadowing a thunderstorm which perfectly reflected her confused, depressed mood. Early in the morning, holding back her growing panic, she urged Haekyang to hurry, because there were only 2 hours left before their wedding of the century. In the dressing room, waiting for the ceremony, Liu Ruyan was torn. She was glad that I was not around, but at the same time she was disappointed by my absence. Subconsciously, she was waiting for my appearance, perhaps in the hope that I would come to stop this farce, or simply as a sign of reconciliation. 5 years of our life together required at least an ending, so in a fit of emotion she sent me a message asking where I was now. At the very moment she pressed send, there was a knock on the door of her room, and the bustle of pre-wedding preparations completely absorbed her attention. She hurried downstairs, forgetting about the phone on the table, not noticing that her message had never been delivered to me. The lavish ceremony had begun. Flowers, expensive music, and hundreds of guests, but somewhere in the depths of her phone, a red non-delivery signal was flashing. Liu Ruyan and Haekyang froze at the end of the corridor, and just as the music started playing, the heavy doors of the banquet hall swung open. She walked towards the altar, looking at Haekyang, but inside her there was only a ringing emptiness. A premonition of disaster did not leave her for a second. At that critical moment, it seemed to me that I was standing before her again in the old hut, reminding her of our promises. Haekyang whispered sweet nothings to her, but the voice in her memory, my voice, drowned out his false words, creating an eerie cacophony in her head. She only came to her senses when Haekyang solemnly announced that he had finally married her, and reality hit her hard. She wanted to answer, "I love you," but the words stuck in her throat, as if some invisible force forbade her to lie at that moment. At that moment, the doors of the hall burst open with a bang, and a group of police officers, ignoring the panic, headed straight towards Haekyang. In front of the city's astonished elite, handcuffs snapped onto Haekyang's wrists. He was accused of premeditated murder. "Ruyan, save me," he shouted, and she, still clinging to the illusion of his kindness, tried to stop the police, demanding an explanation. The police chief was adamant, "Mr. Liu, there is enough evidence and you must also come with us." The celebration turned into chaos, and cameras from around the world immediately turned toward the police station, covering the Liu family's disgrace. When she was shown evidence that Haekyang not only lied, but also framed me through his connections in the psychiatric clinic, her heart turned to ice. The police gave her screenshots of correspondence, bank transfers, and camera recordings that completely destroyed her faith in the saint Haekyang. She read these documents and understood that all this time, while I was suffering, he was weaving a web that took her breath away. She remembered how Haekyang had once suffered over a dead butterfly, and now she realized that this man had become a real monster. When she entered the interrogation room, she saw him pale, with tears in his eyes, still trying to play the role of the victim. The anger that had previously burned within her was replaced by devastation as he grabbed her shoulders, continuing to plead for help. "I did it only out of love for you. I was afraid that he would take you away," he repeated, and these words sounded like a confession of madness. She was exhausted, but by inertia she continued to promise, "I won't let you suffer," although something inside her had broken forever. She distanced herself from him and within a week had fulfilled her obligations to protect him, but began to deliberately disappear from his life. Now she was free from him, but she felt completely lost, not knowing how to live on without her purpose. Those around her, seeing how she was moving away from Haekyang, began to whisper, "Sister, if it doesn't work out with him, go back to Fang Yuan." My name, heard after so many days, made her heart skip a beat. She really missed me. She remembered how devoted I was to her, how I cooked porridge, how I read books while she worked. I was her quiet haven. In her drunken stupor, she saw how Haekyang and I, although similar in appearance, were in fact complete opposites. Haekyang was a capricious child who demanded attention, and I was the one who silently built her life, asking nothing in return. She remembered how she was ready to give up her inheritance for him, and how that contrasted with how I protected her peace. Such a good person, she thought, realizing that if it weren't for my mother's illness, I would have been the ideal partner for her. But it was too late. The realization that love was there and she had chosen falsehood tore her soul apart. She glanced at her phone. The message was still hanging there with a red exclamation mark, meaning I hadn't even received it. Have I really offended him that much? She thought, feeling a frightening, almost painful concern for me growing inside her. She ignored the opinions of others, went to the factory herself, and then to that very wonton shop. She bought my favorite crab wontons, believing that if she brought them to me, I would forgive her like I had before. She was sure that I was simply offended, and that as soon as she took a step towards me, everything would return to normal. But when she drove up to my villa, her heart sank with a strange premonition. It was dark all around. Only one villa was lit up, but it was not the one where I lived. I had long since left that place behind, erasing my traces. She stood at the empty gate with a plate of cooling wontons, realizing for the first time that the door she had closed for me was now forever closed for her as well. The villa was pitch dark and I felt like I had entered another world, but Liu Ruyan was already entering, overcome with a desperate desire to find me. She dreamed of hugging me, justifying herself by saying she was busy, but when the light came on, a cruel blow awaited her. There was emptiness everywhere, bookcases, wardrobes, rooms, everything looked as if no one had ever lived there. The silence pressed on her ears, and with each passing second, the realization of my final disappearance filled her soul with icy rage. She refused to believe it, rushing to the hospital, convincing herself that I couldn't leave while my mother was there. But a new nightmare awaited her at the hospital. The attending physician told her that my mother had died 2 months ago, and I had paid for everything and gone into the unknown. The doctor added that she herself had forbidden saving my mother, and I spent that last night kneeling before her body. The nurses saw me crying and took care of the funeral themselves, while Liu Ruyan, as it turned out, was drunk and indifferent at the time. I remembered that night call. I was crying, begging, and she just laughed at me, not even suspecting that I was saying goodbye to my mother's life. She was too busy with her happiness with Hekyang to notice how she was destroying my last treasure. She dialed my number with trembling hands, hoping to hear my voice, but only a cold, mechanical robot informed her that the subscriber was out of the network. Out of rage and panic, she smashed the phone, realizing that all ties with me had been severed irrevocably. She felt a chill run down her spine. I had decided to leave her forever, and the fear of the unknown gripped her heart. The assistant reporting back that night confirmed the worst. I was at the airport, but my tracks were carefully covered. She envied my skill at hiding and realized that someone was professionally helping me disappear from her life. There was no evidence, only my bank account remained with the money she had returned, 3.8 million, which now seemed like a joke. She was beside herself with anger. I didn't just leave, I demonstratively refused the handouts and erased my existence. She thought I was pretending, wanting to avenge my mother, but now she saw that my departure was decisive and irrevocable. When the doorbell rang, she jumped, hoping it was me, but it was only the assistant standing on the threshold with bad news. Her disappointment was so acute that she felt herself falling into emptiness, losing her footing. The assistant reported that the search had reached a dead end, but news came from the hospital. Old Mr. Liu had finally regained consciousness. At the hospital, Liu Ruyan received a harsh reception. Her grandfather, full of anger, hit her with a stick, demanding an answer for everything that had happened. Under his heavy gaze, she sank to her knees, feeling her authority crumble. "It was Hekyang who pushed me off the roof, and you married him," the old man shouted, accusing her of bringing shame on the entire family. Every blow of the stick to the floor echoed in her heart, and she, sobbing, could not believe that the man she had chosen was her executioner. Grandfather revealed the truth. Hekyang not only tried to kill him, but also used her to gain the family jade and power. She realized that she had adopted a wolf cub who had looked at her with a thirst for profit and cynicism for the past 10 years. Shame clouded her eyes. She realized how much harm she had done to me for the sake of this monster, and how blind she had been all this time. All her pride crumbled when she realized that her love for Hekyang was just a tool in his dirty hands. After her grandfather was discharged, she went to the villa where Hekyang lived to finally put everything in order. Hekyang, still hoping for her leniency, began his usual game, but this time his words found no response. His tears, which had once made her heart melt, now seemed like a cheap imitation of suffering. "Ruyan, what are you doing here?" he asked, but she only remained silent, looking at him as if he were a stranger. Who is he? My quiet words and my sincerity, which she had once so carelessly trampled on, floated through her mind. She remembered my vows to love her all my life, and how I was always ready to give everything for her comfort. "I was your puppet," she said coldly, and for the first time Hekyang heard the steel of disappointment in her voice. He tried to hide behind his love, but she only interrupted his excuses with an icy look. She had forgiven him hundreds of times, believing in his kindness, but now the mask was torn off forever. Such love was poison, and now that she saw the truth, she wanted to get rid of it completely. She turned away from him, ordering him to be driven away, and that night Hecking knew for the first time the fear of true loneliness. The next morning she threw him divorce papers and a one-way ticket, cutting him out of her life forever. It was the end of their 10-year friendship, and she did not take the matter to the police only out of respect for the past, which was long dead. He begged her not to push him away, but in her eyes there was nothing but cold indifference to his fate. He tried to remind her of our shared moments, of those days when we were happy, but she only smiled. Pictures emerged in her memory, the sunrise, our conversations, the warmth, all of this now seemed alien to her, not her life. "I haven't forgotten," she replied, "but the end of this story has become so terrible that I want to erase even the memory of it." She pointed to the door, and this gesture became her liberation from the shackles with which she had once bound herself. Hecking disappeared into nowhere, and she remained in silence, where for the first time in 5 years there was neither me nor him, but only herself. Staring into the void, she wondered if she had ever been happy and realized that my world was the only one where I was truly sincere. I, having reached a secret laboratory in the mountains of China, finally began a new life, where my talent belonged only to me and the country, and not to a handful of rich madmen. Working at the International Research Institute is a challenging and demanding endeavor, but for me it has been more than just a career, it has been the highest honor. Since childhood, due to my mother's poor health and illness, medicine was my only dream. I wanted to learn how to heal so that no one else would suffer like we did. I had been through hospitals and suffering, so when I became a medical student, I threw myself into my studies with such zeal as if someone's life depended on every word. The university became my first step towards liberation, and I devoted all my time to science, even when locked in a villa in captivity. You could say I was born for medicine. My talent was evident in every detail, and no external circumstances could stop my development. After a month of intensive training, I mastered the complex concepts and officially became a full member of the National Research Institute. My life turned into endless research, but one day my bandmates, while going through my things, accidentally stumbled upon an old photograph. "Feng Yuan, who's that next to you? Is Liu Ruyan your girlfriend?" they asked, and the question sounded like an echo from another life. The name Liu Ruyan seemed alien to me, as if erased from my memory. The image of the man who once caused me so much pain faded. I took this photo and without hesitation threw it in the trash can, finally letting go of the past. Now it was just a random passerby. My colleagues were interested in my personal life, but I just laughed it off. After everything I had been through, my heart was closed to old ghosts. Completing the project became a race for survival for us. We worked day and night, driven by Professor Bai's passion. "This is my best student standing on the shoulders of giants," the professor said proudly, realizing that success was already close. I passed on the results of the experiments to him, feeling that we had chosen the right direction. Science was beginning to bear fruit. In less than an hour, my name was known throughout the Institute's headquarters. Recognition came quickly, a reward for my sleepless nights. The head of the Institute asked me what I wanted as a reward, but the only thing I wanted was to feel the taste of peace after long years of struggle. I was a favorite of fate in terms of talent and a mad devil in terms of work. I worked even when I was fainting from exhaustion. For the first time in a long time, I asked for a month's leave just to rest, and Professor Bai, seeing my condition, happily agreed. He looked at me with fatherly concern, reminding me that it was time for me to finally think about personal happiness and not just about test tubes. I left the capital deciding that love was not for me, and went on a solo trip to see the sea, which I had once only dreamed of. The beach, the sunset, the sound of the surf, these moments that once seemed unattainable now belonged only to me. I felt free, as if I were somewhere high in the mountains, where the soul could finally talk with the memory of my mother. Returning to the city, I was ready to continue working, but Professor Bai insisted on a meeting, citing some personal matters. "Don't worry, Feng Yuan, my daughter will pick you up," he said, and that call was the start of something completely unexpected. When the door opened, I saw a woman whose image made me freeze. It was Bai Ningbin, my first love from my college days. The reunion was as abrupt as an electric shock. I looked at her and had difficulty finding words to hide my excitement. Bai Ningbin was the same girl who once helped me when I, timid and broken, stood with my luggage at the gate of the dormitory. She was the only person who showed kindness back then, and her smile was forever imprinted in my heart, even though I tried to forget it. We saw each other in the college corridors, exchanged short phrases, and every time our paths crossed, the world around us seemed brighter. But back then, in my youth, I considered myself a loner and was afraid to get close, so our paths diverged when I became immersed in problems with my mother. Now she stood before me, still the same bright, kind, and it seemed that all these 5 years of waiting were just preparation for this meeting. Everyone thought that we would be together, but life separated us. Now, seeing her again, I realized that my feelings have not disappeared. She looked at me with her piercing eyes. "Fang Yuan, can I chase you now?" And there was so much hope in this question. We drove to Professor Bayu, and in the silence of the car, I felt the ice in my soul begin to melt completely. She was busy in the kitchen, and I caught myself thinking that she was cooking exactly what I liked without even asking me. She knew my tastes better than I did, and this attention, which I had never received from Liu Ruyan, truly touched me. "How do you know I like it?" I asked, and she just smiled, remembering details of our student life that I thought I had forgotten. With her, I felt like a person who was seen and valued, not an instrument, as I had in my previous relationships. I finally relaxed, stopped expecting a catch, and simply allowed myself to enjoy this evening, this warmth, and this care. Bai Ningbin was the embodiment of calm. She talked to me as if the 5 years of separation had never happened. At some point, I decided to ask, "Why did you come back? You had a successful life abroad." She looked me straight in the eyes and answered simply and firmly, "Fang Yuan, I've come back for you." The air in the room froze, and I felt my earlobes burning with embarrassment and an unprecedented calm spreading through my heart. It was raining outside, but I felt warm. The story with Liu Ruyan, with her betrayals and cruelty, was a long way in the past. Now, with Bai Ningbin, I realized that true love is not suffering and control, but being understood without words. I took a deep breath, realizing that my past life was just a dark corridor leading to this bright moment. I was no longer a replacement or a faithful dog. I was a man who had finally earned the right to his own happiness. Bai Ningbin was my new beginning, my haven that I had been longing for so long without even realizing it. We talked until late at night, and I found myself thinking that I was ready to start writing a new chapter, a chapter where I choose my own destiny. Now I knew the past has no power over those who have found the strength not only to leave, but also to open themselves to a new light. The rain, which had started suddenly, did not stop for 2 hours, flooding the streets with red streams as if the sky itself was mourning the change. Bai Ningbin went to the bathroom, and I stayed in her apartment, hoping to find a hair dryer to warm myself up in this cozy warmth. A casual glance fell on the table, where among the things lay our old photograph from the championship and a forgotten diary. I opened the pages to find Ningbin's handwriting. I met a guy with a pleasant voice. "His name is Fang Yuan. I think I like him." The diary brought those days back to life, her doubts, her timid hopes, the confessions she never dared to say out loud to me. The tears on the old pages burned my heart. I realized that all this time, while I was suffering, she also carried this pain within herself. In her note about our separation, she apologized for not knowing about my mother's illness at the time and for letting me go. I realized how wrong I was to blame her for all the troubles. She was just a frightened girl who couldn't cope with the sudden circumstances that had suddenly arisen. Her departure abroad was not an escape, but an attempt to hide from her own pain, but now she has returned to fix everything that we destroyed. We began a new life working side by side, and in this shared work I found not only a calling, but also healing. Bai Ningbin became that sunshine after a long storm, restoring my faith that happiness is possible. Now, instead of being forced to be alone in the villa, I was surrounded by people who appreciated my talent and supported me in every endeavor. Every minute with Ningbin filled my life with meaning, erasing from my memory the false, white light with which they tried to blind me before. She took care of my health, planned my day, and even taught me to enjoy simple things again that I had forgotten how to notice. We officially became a couple, and the success of the project I was responsible for allowed us to return to the headquarters of the National Institute. The publicity and attention of journalists did not bother us, because now we were a single whole that had gone through its trials. Our round-the-world trip was our final chord. We met her mother, who welcomed us with such warmth that I almost burst into tears. She gave us a jade pendant, blessing us for a marriage I had never even dreamed of before. Ningbin, always so reserved, openly told my mother that she wanted to be with me, and her determination delighted me to the depths of my soul. I realized that marriage with her was not shackles, but freedom that I finally earned through my perseverance and loyalty to myself. We decided to give ourselves time, enjoying every moment of our present, not rushing things, but knowing for sure that we will not be separated. Meanwhile, Liu Ruyan's world was in ruins. Hekyang, deprived of her support and money, had lost all its former glory. He stooped to the level of humiliation, lying at Ruyan's feet and trying to win back her favor, but she saw him as nothing more than a poisonous snake. Her coldness towards him was final. She blocked his accounts and showed him the door, announcing the breakup to the whole world. Hekyang, once proud and defiant, had become a whiny child whose pleas only filled Ruyan with deep disgust. In his fits of despair, he swore that he would apologize to me, if only she would not drive him away, but it was too late. Ruyan, left in the empty villa, increasingly remembered me not as a replacement, but as the only person who loved her sincerely. She began to abuse alcohol, trying to dull the pain in the very room where I once lived. In her alcoholic delirium, she imagined my face, my laughter, and the question I asked her in those difficult days: "Will you always treat me this well?" Now that I was not around, she remembered with horror how petty she had been to my needs, how she had seen me only as a way to get money. She sold my gifts, haggled over every penny, not realizing that at that moment she was losing my soul forever. She blamed herself for becoming greedy and cold while I, the man she despised, was building my life from scratch. Hekyang continued to pursue her, becoming a pathetic imitation of the hero he considered himself to be. He begged her to look at him again, promising to become that gentle Hekyang from her illusions, but she only saw emptiness in front of her. Her entire life, built on lies and false glitter, collapsed, leaving her alone with the ghosts of her own past. And I, looking out the laboratory window at the mountains, understood. The price they paid for their blindness was endless loneliness. I found my haven in Ningbin, where there was no place for money, calculation, or dirty games behind my back. We were building a future where every day brought the joy of discovery, not anxiety about what tomorrow evening would bring. Liu Ruyan remained forever in the past, a lesson that loyalty cannot be bought when you have nothing but gold. Hekyang remained in his grievances, unable to understand that his victory over Fang Yuan was his greatest defeat. I no longer looked back. My name, once whispered with contempt, now sounded in the halls of the National Institute with respect. I became who I always wanted to be, a scientist, a healer, a person who found his happiness despite all obstacles. The rain outside stopped, giving way to a clear, crisp sky, as clear as my resolve to never return to them. I hugged Ningbin, feeling her warmth, and realized that this silence was the most precious reward I had ever won. The past did not disappear without a trace. It became the foundation on which I built my new, honest, and free life. We were on the threshold of new achievements, and I knew that no matter what happened, I would never again let others decide for me. My story is not a tale of revenge, but a story about how important it is to leave a game in time where the rules are not written for you. I forgive them for never realizing what they were missing when they let me go. Now my heart belongs only to the one who has been waiting for me all these years, and to the science that saves lives. The end of the road is only the beginning of real life, and I enter it with pride, leaving all grievances behind. I warned her if she still counted on my affections, she should stop her dirty games. She naively hoped that my words would make her feel ashamed, but there was not a drop of remorse in her eyes. She didn't even dare show me her awkward love for God. She just looked at me with that expression on her face. Wasn't our relationship built on money from the very beginning? The sight of her helplessness and defeat broke me. After all, she was the one who voluntarily signed the contract with me. She saw me as a bargaining chip, but why is she now acting as if money means nothing to her? Is she really suffering that much? She's ruined everything. It seems Liu Ruyan sees my disappointment time and time again. Finally, she came to her senses and left my space, left alone. I was furious and smashed a bottle of wine, furious with myself. If I had realized earlier how disgusting she was acting, we wouldn't have reached this chaos and separation. Hekyang then told her directly, "You're in love with Fang Yuan, aren't you? Admit it, you love him to death." But she was only playing the victim, pretending to be indifferent to me. Hypocrite, love, after all the expectations and hopes she had trampled on. Liu Ruyan finally realized she'd fallen in love with me, but it was too late. She hadn't appreciated me when she had me, and she'd wasted all the good things we shared. It seemed absurd because she'd always known the truth. I did so much for her and she took it for granted. Once I even risked my life for her. I was ready to lock myself away in this golden world of wealth for her sake. I once sacrificed my freedom and future for her, believing we would be together. But one day, she caused me unbearable pain because of Hekyang. How much pain I felt then! Now it was Liu Ruyan's turn to feel pain 1,000 times greater than mine. She turned my room upside down and found the hidden object, a jar containing 999 paper stars. Liu Ruyan opened one of them as if she'd opened my heart. Our plans were written there, dates, going to the movies together. I dreamed of going on a romantic trip with her. I made a list of places and planned a route to Paris. But now she wandered around Paris alone, trying in vain to hear my voice. She reluctantly traveled to many countries. I visited all the places I wanted to go but never got around to. Time passed. Due to her scandalous actions, Liu's shares plummeted practically overnight. Countless partners demanded explanations and solutions. Hidden corruption and decay, as well as my final cooling toward her, dealt a fatal blow, driving the Liu group of companies into bankruptcy. But she didn't care. Money could be made again, the company could be revived, but love was gone forever. It was like losing my soul. It was at that moment when she set out to find me that everything changed. Grandfather brought her to the old house and threw a newspaper with my photo on the table. Liu Ruyan didn't expect to see me again. At the newspaper, I stood at the podium of the National Research Institute. My gaze betrayed the changes I had experienced. I had finally found peace of mind. Even in the newspaper photo, my face radiated calm and confidence. Liu Ruyan, overcome with excitement, was about to run toward me. But the bodyguard at the door blocked her way. She was confused. "Grandpa, let me out. I have to find Fang Yuan." "Isn't he the one you hated most? I'll apologize to him, ask for forgiveness, and make him marry you." The old man looked at her with a bitter smile. His eyes were filled with condemnation. "You complained for so long that I ruined your union with Hekyang and married you off to someone you didn't love. But look, everything's back to normal. Fang Yuan abandoned you, you married Hekyang and had a wedding. Weren't you happy? What's happening now? Are you saying you've suddenly fallen in love with Fang Yuan?" Grandfather's words were full of sarcasm. Liu Ruyan couldn't object. After all, she had insisted on marrying Hekyang herself. She was unhappy with me and wanted to destroy my reputation. I had a friend who saw how she treated me and advised her to come to her senses before it was too late. But she stubbornly believed I was just playing on her nerves. If I needed her, I would have returned long ago. But would someone as ambitious as me waste his time on her? I left silently, having taken my revenge for everything. Father Liu asked her with hatred, "Tell me, what do you even want?" Liu Ruyan's mind was clouded. Blinded by her own desires, she wanted to find me. She hoped I would forgive her and we would be reunited, but deep down, she knew she no longer deserved me. As soon as this thought flashed through her mind, she replied, "Grandpa, I want to find Fang Yuan. I want to become his wife." She tried to break free, but the next second she felt a blow and lost consciousness. When she came to, she found herself locked in the old house. The doors and windows were tightly closed. The nanny who had looked after her since childhood tried to reason with her. "Miss, don't get hung up on Mr. Fang Yuan. It will only bring you suffering." But she retorted, "My life has no meaning without Fang Yuan." Liu Ruyan refused to listen. As punishment for her stubbornness, her grandfather ordered her locked up. On the first day, she screamed and became hysterical. No one paid any attention to her. The next day, she broke everything she could get her hands on while trying to jump out of a window, injuring her leg. On the third day, she went on a hunger strike. She resisted stubbornly. A week passed, and due to severe dehydration, she had to be hospitalized. Saving her wasn't easy. Even while angry with her, the grandfather couldn't help but feel pity. As soon as the bodyguard let his guard down, she boarded the overnight train to the institute's headquarters, but the guard wouldn't let her in. She rushed at him in anger. "Do you even know who I am? I'm Fang Yuan's fiancé. Let me see him." But she was driven away again and again in full view of passers-by. The guard said dismissively, "What kind of girl thinks she's a bride? What shamelessness. Look at what she wants, goose meat." Fang Yuan is the pride of our country, an outstanding scholar who has saved thousands of lives. And who are you to dishonor him with your presence? These words cut her like a tornado. She felt the full cruelty of her humiliation. Liu Ruyan's hands clenched into fists, pain piercing her body. But she continued to stand like a statue, under the pouring rain and the peals of thunder, not feeling the cold. She didn't move. It was an unknown amount of time before an umbrella appeared over her head. A voice was heard from behind. "Ruyan, should we go back?" She turned around and saw Hekyang standing next to her. Liu Ruyan's gaze was filled with icy indifference. Hekyang felt bitterness in his heart. If it weren't for me, she could have been happy with him. He no longer saw her as his niece. He wanted to be her husband, but now she looked at him with undisguised disgust. Why? He had already left, but she was still obsessed with me. "Can't you see me?" Hekyang pleaded, but received no response from her. "Hekyang, it's over between us. There will be no reconciliation in the future. Don't come to me again." But Hekyang wouldn't hear of it. A barrage of reproaches descended on me. "Liu Ruyan, I've been with you for 11 years and given you the most precious years of my life." Could she really be so heartless? The umbrella hit her, the world spun before her eyes, and she lost consciousness before she could even blink. When Liu Ruyan woke up, she found herself in a strange room. She was lying on the edge of the bed and Hekyang was leaning over her. I was filled with anger at this treacherous man. For a moment, I lost control. I was so furious that I kicked Hekyang in my sleep. He was still awake and the blow left his face bruised. My voice sounded cold and distant. It was like an echo from a distant past. "Who gave you permission to climb onto my bed? What are you planning?" The next second, Hekyang was thrown back against the wall with a crash. He collapsed to the floor, unable to utter a word. Liu Ruyan took out her phone and called security. Soon, bodyguards burst into the room with contraceptives. I gave the order without hesitation to end this once and for all, without allowing any further mistakes. Hekyang was shaking with fear, but Liu Ruyan didn't give him a chance to defend himself. Bodyguards dragged him out of the house and took him to the hospital. I understood Hekyang's dastardly plans perfectly well. As long as she had a child, she could keep me by her side. Even if I resisted, Grandfather Liu would force me to marry her to preserve the family. I had no intention of accepting the rich man's blessing. Thinking about this, I only clenched my fists tighter, but Liu Ruyan didn't know that. Meanwhile, I was searching for information about the scandal at the institute. It turned out that a passerby had filmed a video that had leaked online. Users quickly identified this beggar. It was Liu Ruyan who had dumped me and married Hekyang. The story instantly went viral. People were shocked by her actions. The only thing noteworthy about her was her casual acquaintance with the dean who had once ruined the Galactica project. I've encountered such baseness in my life. Reading the comments, I just chuckled. After all, it was just an attempt to assert oneself at my expense. Fortunately, there were decent people around me. "What are you looking at? I'm so mesmerized by you." Bai Ningbin hugged me from behind, gently stroking my face. However, upon seeing the contents of my phone, she froze. She looked nervous and carefully put my phone on the table. "What did you see there? Who did this?" She looked worried and I was completely confused. I had questions. "Did you already know about this? What were you thinking?" Bai Ningbin immediately confessed. She said she was at headquarters last night and witnessed that scene. She was very upset. Gods, how mad she was when she saw Liu Ruyan that night. She wanted to go and sort things out with her to take revenge for all my pain, but I stopped her. After all, I once had feelings for Liu Ruyan. Fearing I'd lose my temper, Bai Ningbin didn't act openly. She simply called security to teach Liu Ruyan a lesson. Now, thinking about it, she was visibly nervous. "Do you love her?" she asked. I laughed. Why should I love her? For her self-pity. The day my mother died, I realized everything. I was so attached to Liu Ruyan that it blinded me. But now, remembering that pain, I only hugged Bai Ningbin to comfort her. "Don't worry, I told you I don't love her anymore," she smiled. "I really love you." She was stunned by my sudden frankness and affection. She couldn't resist and kissed me hard. After a while, I decided it was time. 2 hours later, Bai Ningbin and I arrived at my mother's grave. "Mom, I've come to visit you." I talked to her for a long time, Bai Ningbin standing next to me. As I left, I held her hand tightly, feeling a mixture of tears and happiness. "Mom, she is the person I want to be with for the rest of my life. I want to marry her. If you can hear me, please bless us." I wanted us to live peacefully. Bai Ningbin also looked serious. Kneeling before the tombstone, she solemnly swore an oath. "Mom, don't worry, trust me with Fang Yuan. I'll never let him down." I smiled. We were just leaving the cemetery. Suddenly, I heard a familiar voice, "Fang Yuan." My smile instantly vanished. I looked closely at the approaching Liu Ruyan. She clearly didn't expect to see me here. She came to pay her respects to my mother but bumped into me. As she was about to approach, she noticed a strange woman next to me. She was so close to me, but the most shocking thing for her was my words, "I'm going to marry this woman." Liu Ruyan was stunned. "Feng Yuan, who is she?" she asked. I looked straight into her eyes. There was no longer any love in them. I intertwined my fingers with Bai Ningbin's. "If you must know, she's my fiancé." Bai Ningbin also deliberately emphasized this point, looking at Liu Ruyan with a defiant expression. Liu Ruyan suddenly lost her temper, turning into a rage. "How is this possible? You love me. How could you fall in love with her so quickly?" I was too lazy to even argue with her. Luckily, I was already getting into Bai Ningbin's car. Liu Ruyan tried to block our way. She fell to her knees in front of me and began to beg. "Feng Yuan, I used to think I loved Hekyang, but now I realize I only love you. Give me a chance." "I know I was wrong, forgive me." She tried to grab my wrist, but Bai Ningbin pushed her away. Even the calmest person has their limits. Bai Ningbin grabbed Liu Ruyan by the coat, her rage boundless. "This slap is for Feng Yuan, this one is for his mother. And this one is for me." Slap after slap. Liu Ruyan was weak and helpless. Because she had been smoking for so long, her body was weakened. The wind could have knocked her off her feet, but she felt no pain, looking at me hopefully. She was still waiting to see echoes of past love in my eyes, but I didn't even look at her. I waited calmly to the side. Bai Ningbin and I, both researchers, knew these blows wouldn't cause her any serious harm. Liu Ruyan had been deluding herself for too long. At that moment, she finally broke down. Bai Ningbin stopped, wiping the blood from her hands. Liu Ruyan was paler than a sheet. I warned her coldly, "You want to call the police? Go ahead, but I'll countersue you for stalking." I learned this tactic from her. The most ironic thing was that the methods she used against me backfired on her. Liu Ruyan's appearance no longer mattered to me. On the contrary, Bai Ningbin was a little alarmed by the whole thing. She often tried to test the waters. "That wedding, is it true or just revenge?" Liu Ruyan. I couldn't help but laugh through my tears. I was no longer frightened by the memories. I didn't need to worry about Bai Ningbin, because only those incapable of true love could be so frightened. I put our wedding on the calendar, chose the date for the day after tomorrow, and suggested that Bai Ningbin go to the registry office to get the certificate. But Bai Ningbin refused. "Now's not the best time." 2 days later, she began leaving early and returning late without explaining anything to me. I was a little bored. When Bai Ningbin set the wedding date, she was so excited. But why did it take so long when it came to the official marriage registration? Everything turned out to be shrouded in mystery. The answer was revealed to me when, on the third night, returning home, I received an invitation to a luxurious restaurant. The entire room was decorated with such grandeur, as if a real wedding was being prepared. The song "Happy Birthday" started playing. I suddenly remembered, today is my birthday. Bai Ningbin rolled out a cake cart, and behind it stood people who were dear to me. My teachers, colleagues, and friends who had supported me all these years were there. "Make a wish," she said. My wish was simple. I wanted my loved ones to always be by my side and for me to be able to live freely and happily. I blew out the candles with a smile. Tears welled up in my eyes. After the party, Bai Ningbin drove me to a small house in the north of the city and handed me the keys. Her gaze, soft and warm, met mine. "Feng Yuan, are you ready to become the master of this house, to become my husband and my companion for the rest of my life?" I was deeply moved, my voice trembling slightly as I replied, "Of course, I'm ready." The moonlight outside the window was blindingly bright, and the lights in the house faded in and out. That night, our relationship reached a new level. I took 2 months off, and we began planning the wedding together. We designed the invitations to make sure everything was perfect. But right before the wedding, I received a message from old Mr. Liu. "Feng Yuan, despite everything in the past, please visit Liu Ruyan in the hospital at least once." The old man had always been kind to me, so I decided to go. Liu Ruyan lay on the bed, and her condition was terrible. She was exhausted, her body felt like it was about to give out. She looked out the window with complete indifference. Her lips were pressed tightly together. She was silent for a long time, and when the doctors confirmed the diagnosis, the first thing she asked was for me. She had something to say. After another heavy hemorrhage, she completely gave up. What right did a dying person have to try to change the course of my life? "You should be happy to see me like this, right?" Liu Ruyan asked mockingly. "You really wanted to get rid of me, didn't you?" "I'm dying, are you happy?" she asked. I just shook my head. "No." A spark suddenly flashed in her eyes. "Really? So you still have feelings for me?" I didn't answer. My life no longer depended on her. She was no longer the center of my world. "What else do you want to say?" I asked, but seeing her fake smile was unbearable. "If you only invited me for these meaningless words, then we have nothing to talk about. My wedding is next week. If you find the strength, I invite you to come." I placed the invitation on the table and turned away forever. I didn't care. I didn't see how, after I left, Liu Ruyan tore up the invitation in anger. She was hurt like a child, and she cried bitterly. She tried to piece together the scraps of the invitation, looking at my name, but in this life I was not destined to be her husband. Liu Ruyan was broken. On the eve of my wedding, she ordered all her belongings sold and transferred the money to my account. But I returned them with a short message: "Miss Liu, please be selfish." She stared at these words for a long time. Did she wonder if I would come back? It was impossible. The day of our lavish wedding arrived. The flowers, the lights, the music, everything was magnificent. Liu Ruyan watched from afar, sensing the irony of fate. Bai Ningbin was wearing a dazzling wedding dress. She walked towards me, and every step she took was full of confidence and love. At the altar, the priest asked, "Miss Bai Ningbin, are you willing to marry Mr. Feng Yuan, for richer or for poorer? Will you love him, respect him, and protect him for the rest of your life?" Bai Ningbin blushed and replied, "I agree." Then the question came to me, "Mr. Feng Yuan, are you willing to take Miss Bai Ningbin as your wife? Will you love her, respect her, and protect her in health and in sickness?" I firmly answered yes. At that moment, Liu Ruyan seemed to stop breathing. I was happy, and this harmony finally destroyed the last ghosts of the past. After the ceremony, Liu Ruyan could hardly stand on her feet. She wanted to see me one last time, but suddenly she saw a car on the road. The car was hurtling straight toward her at breakneck speed. Hekyang was at the wheel. Liu Ruyan didn't even have time to process what was happening. She tried to dodge but was thrown 10 meters away. The flowers she was holding fell from her hands. Her entire body was covered in blood. She watched me walk away toward happiness. At that moment, her eyes closed forever. Liu Ruyan fell into eternal sleep. Hekyang was arrested and punished for his actions. 2 years passed, and Bai Ningbin and I had a beautiful daughter. The sun was shining brightly that day, and the light breeze seemed to me a great blessing of fate.